Hello, today I'm going to make another low production quality vlog, but I'm going to talk about a topic that I just want to talk about today, so it has nothing to do with finance, although it does have to do with life philosophy. I'm going to discuss three my favorite movies that I've watched recently. Three Idiots, Short Term 12, and Nocturnal Animals. So I'm just going to give you my review of these movies and the reasons why I like them. So let's start with Three Idiots. Three Idiots is actually a Bollywood movie, and it follows three Indian students, Farhan, Raju, and Rancho, who are attending a top engineering school in India. And the reason I like this movie so much is because it addresses the problems with the academic system, which I based a lot of my soon-to-be launched SKWealthAcademy upon the concept. And that is that too much of academia revolves around rote memorization and memorization of knowledge rather than the application of knowledge. And Rancho is kind of seen as a rebel or trailblazer, and he actually brings up this point, which would never ever be brought up in a Hollywood movie. So I found it, I was actually shocked when the character of Rancho actually says, look at this guy who's actually applying knowledge versus just memorizing it. And he constantly is kind of bucking the system, which is represented by this professor named Viru, who the students mockingly throw shade at by calling Virus. And he's a strictly by the books, by the rules kind of guy, and Rancho's constantly breaking the rules, and it's really interesting that way. And I think you really should check out this movie. Again, it's called Three Idiots, and you should give it a chance, because at first when I started watching it, I actually turned it off in the first 20 minutes because I really wasn't into it. And any of you that are familiar with Bollywood movies knows that the characters are going to break out into song and dance. I'm not a big fan of that, but as far as I can remember, there are only three. And I actually kind of like one of the song and dance routines, but there's only three, so you'll have to bear through that if you're not really into the musical aspect of movies. So it's not the story's not told in musical capacity, the whole movie. There's only like three, I believe, maybe four at most in a 2-hour movie, so it's not too bad. But I like the humor. I also like the fact that it touches on very serious topics as well, because it addresses the issue of suicide. And suicide in South Korea and a lot of Asian countries is a really problematic issue. And in fact, suicide is the #1 cause of death in South Korea for kids aged between 10 up to young adults up to 30. So between the ages of 10 and 30, suicide is actually the #1 cause of death in South Korea, which is horrendous. And in studies, the main reason actually for contemplating suicide, when they did a study between people aged 10 to 30 in South Korea, they said, quote, the stress of living in a hyper-competitive society or pressure over exam results in college entrance. So they address this issue in the movie Three Idiots, actually, with the character of Farhan, who wants to become a photographer, but that's unacceptable to his parents, and he must become an engineer. So there's a really touching scene in the movie where Farhan confronts his dad and gets up the courage to say that he does not want to be an engineer, and for his parents to please, he pleads with his father to please understand that his passion in life is photography and not engineering. And it's funny because I remember in university having the exact same conversation with a Vietnamese friend of mine, and I told him, because he showed me watercolor paintings that he had done when he was a kid, when he was a teenager, like at 15 or 16, and they were just rad, man. They were amazing, because I looked at one, it was a portrait of a young girl, and I thought at first it was a photograph. That's how good he was as an artist. And he told me he wanted to become an architect, but his parents said that was unacceptable, that he must become an engineer. So I remember having the exact same discussion with him that they had in this film, that they represented in this film, telling him that he did not want to become an engineer, that he should have that discussion with his parents, that they should allow him to become an architect, because I said he was going to grow up to totally resent his parents if he went on to be an engineer. So I wasn't really close with this guy. I remember just meeting him through a friend, so I don't know if he actually took my advice and had that discussion and broke away, or because there's a tremendous amount of pressure, you don't understand, and everyone I know that is like first generation Asian immigrant in the United States understands what I'm talking about, because there's only certain professions that are acceptable to their parents, and usually that's medicine, law, or engineering. So those are the three professions that we have to become, and if we don't want to do that, then we're looked at being disobedient, like spoiled, unappreciative kids by our parents. So I think, you know, even though this is an Indian movie, that every Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Indian, of course, person, and any Asian person that is first generation in a Western country can relate to this, as well as, of course, growing up in an Asian country can relate to this, because it does present many issues that I found to be, you know, very, very, very realistic. The one thing you know, as far as the things I didn't like the fact that the establishment person, the professor named Viru, who the students throw shade at and call virus, was such a caricature, and he talks with a lisp, and the actor himself doesn't have a lisp, so I didn't think he needed to play his role as such a caricature. He could have played it more realistic, and that would have made the movie more realistic. But I do like that the love interest of Rancho, beautiful Indian girl named Pia, she is involved with, because she has a lot of pressure, because she's kind of a high society kind of person to also marry into her caste or into her socioeconomic status, but the person that's courting her is really kind of an ass, and all he cares about is money. So some of the things I remember in the movie were kind of hilarious, because Rancho kind of triggers this and shows Pia what a jerk this guy is by just deliberately spilling mint sauce on his shoes, and the guy goes on a rampage about how expensive his shoes are, what material his shoes are made out of. Because I went to an Ivy League school as an undergrad, and I remember like saying the exact same things about some of the people there. And I remember talking to one of my friends when the guy Henry was approaching us. I said, "Hey, check this out. You want to know how much Henry's shoes cost?" And this is absolutely, I'm not making this up. I said, "Look, let me just tell you how. Just check this out." When Henry came up to us, I said, "Man, yo, those shoes are some ugly shoes, man." And Henry's like, "You know how much these shoes cost? These shoes cost $800. And so like I just elbowed my friend and said, "See, I told you, man." He would tell you, justify anything that he owns by just the price. And there are certain people in life that's all they care about is just material possessions and consumerism. And I think that's really important too, because part of my SK Wealth Academy is addressing a more holistic definition of the word success. That success shouldn't just be about who can consume the most expensive material goods, but who approaches life in a more holistic way, as the character Rancho does. And friendship, the three friends in this movie, that's a really important element to this movie, is that the strength and loyalty of friends. And I think that's a really important message, that friendship and happiness is a great, huge, important part of the equation of success, and without that you really don't have success. And furthermore, lastly, before I move on, I remember a really good friend of mine I had in uni. Her name was Nalini, and she was a friend of mine that was Indian. And I remember also, like, after university, we graduated. Sorry about the background noise. After we graduated, I discovered that she had gone back to India and kind of had an arranged marriage. And if you are going to Ivy League school and you're from an Asian country, a Southeast Asian country, then most likely your family has a good deal of money and wealth. And I think, I don't want to put words in her mouth, because I kind of lost touch with her, sadly, after we graduated, but I feel like she had a lot of pressure, just like the girl Pia in the movie, because I discovered that she had gone back to India through an arranged marriage, had married someone, and I felt like she had a lot of pressure to marry into the type of wealth that she came from, whereas she couldn't really she wasn't as free to pursue like a marriage based upon just someone she truly, truly loved. Although she might have loved that person too. But I'm saying, just like sometimes we're limited and bound by the cultural expectations, and this movie also addresses a lot of those issues too, how we shouldn't be confined by the cultural expectations of where we are born or what type of culture we're born into, as happens all the time. And I also saw that a lot in LA too, because I remember one time that I had a date with this Vietnamese girl, and I took her to a friend of mine's house party. It was exactly the kind of environment I felt comfortable in, because at the house party, with people from all kinds of races, which you're going to find in LA. So there are whites, blacks, Asians, Latinos, and most were involved in creative industries and the arts, and music in LA. So, but I could tell that my friend, because she was like limited in her experience with people just by really hanging out with, the tight-knit Vietnamese community in LA, that she felt totally out of comfort of her skin. So I think the other great message of Three Idiots is that you should seek diverse and non-conformist and non-systemic kinds of opinions to really broaden your horizons to live a much broader, richer life and more fulfilling and satisfying life. Okay, so next on to my second movie, which is Short Term 12. Now, this movie is about basically a short-term foster care facility in which there are three counselors: Grace, and I would say Marcus, the one of the troubled youth in the movie, were the two main characters. And it's a very sad movie, but it's very reaffirming, with an emphasis on doing something in your life that improves the communities in which you live, which again is one of my prime messages of SK Wealth Academy, is that I don't want people just to go for material success by stepping on other people's lives or stepping over other people to get ahead, but also taking into serious account the impact you're going to have on the communities that you're dealing with and the communities in which you live. And I think that's a great message of Short Term 12, is that even though the main counselors in this movie, they don't live in the same communities that the kids they're counseling grew up in, but they're doing everything they can to help these kids. And it's evident that they deeply care about these kids, because the script is written so well and the characters are developed so well, so they will even bend the rules of the short-term care facility to help out the kids as much as they can and to protect the kids as much as they can. And the main character, Marcus, reminds me a lot of some of the average kids I dealt with in Philadelphia, in North Philadelphia, at Ben Franklin High School, at John Bartram High School, and also in Los Angeles when I dealt with kids that had just gotten out of gangs, so ex-gang members that were in their teens, and some of the issues they were going through, because it deals with the fact that no matter what your position in life, no matter what your struggles, no matter if you've had issues of lots of violence in your life and living in those kinds of neighborhoods where it's high crime, you see lots of things that no kid should see, that they still want the same things out of life, which is to be happy, to improve their lives, and to rise up above their struggle. I highly recommend Short Term 12, one of my favorite movies of the last 5 years. Last movie I'm going to get to is Nocturnal Animals. Now, this one's probably the saddest movie of the three movies, and it deals with a woman named Susan, who's played by Amy Adams, who receives a book manuscript from her ex-husband, a man who she left about 20 years earlier, asking for her opinion about the manuscript. Now, the second part of the movie, or second element of the movie, follows the actual manuscript called Nocturnal Animals. So it flips back between telling the story that's told in the manuscript, Nocturnal Animals, and the real life of Susan. And the manuscript, Nocturnal Animals, revolves around a man whose family vacation turns violent and deadly. And the part where the movie transitions back to reality follows the story of Susan, who really then begins questioning her marriage and confronting some dark truths about herself, because in reality she gave up a partnership she had with the guy that wrote the manuscript because he was a struggling artist, didn't really have any money for the security of a really wealthy man who she married, but who she was kind of feeling a real huge void in her marriage, like a non-fulfilling kind of life. Now, what does this have to do with SK Wealth Academy? Actually has to do a lot, again, because I say it's about following your heart, following things you love, living a really fulfilling life versus just trying to, get yours and really living that really kind of self-serving, egotistical, narcissistic life that is encouraged today. And the negatives about this movie is that there's some very obvious symbolism that I felt the director is Tom Ford. For those of you that don't know, Tom Ford is the guy that actually, besides his own brand, Tom Ford. Now he was the person that actually turned Gucci around. So you're going to expect a very artistic eye from him. And the movie is very beautiful from a visual standpoint, which you would expect from someone like him. And I think this was his second movie that he directed, but there's some symbolism, some analogies that are made in this movie that he just spells out in black and white to the viewer. And I don't think he really needs to do that. I think he can assume the viewer is going to be a lot more intellectual and doesn't need to be told, hey, this is an analogy I'm telling you about life here, just by spelling it out in black and white in the movie. So it didn't need to be so overt. Those are the 3 movies that I recommend. 3 Idiots, Short Term 12, and Nocturnal Animal. So catch you all next time, and thanks for watching this.